Greetings, everyone. My name is Blaze the Cat, and today I will be reading you all Chapter 4 of The Walking Dead Hope, a Walking Dead fan fiction written by Goofy Gomez. Now, this was narrated by the Shadow Lioness, who is about to finish this fanfic today. And so far, she enjoys this fan fiction. And I'm proud to say that so far, Rouge, Tangle, and Vector have enjoyed this story so far too. And I have not read this, so I'm going to read the 4th chapter of The Walking Dead Hope. Goofy Gomez, if you're watching this, thank you very, very much for giving us permission to read your story. Now, without wasting any more time, let's get reading. Clementine? Javi's voice was a mixture of awe and disbelief. With a brief smile, Clem nodded. A man promptly stepped forward and embraced her. She closed her eyes and returned the gesture. They hadn't seen each other in 8 years. Yet Javi had changed very little. He had apparently trimmed his beard, accenting his sharp jawline. "Javi," she whispered, breaking away from him, and smiled up at the man. "It's been a while. Boy, I'll say," he said, chuckling. It was then he noticed the 3 standing behind her. Want to introduce us? Clementine looked back and nodded, locking eyes with Louis. "Of course," she said, stepping back. "This is my best friend, Violet." "Hey," the blonde said, nodding slightly. Javi smiled and nodded back, turning to look at the 10-year-old boy standing beside her. "That's AJ," she told him. "Remember him?" "As a matter of fact, I do," he said, kneeling in front of AJ. "Hey, little man, name is Javi. I was the one who helped Clem find you all those years ago." AJ smiled and nodded. "Yeah, she told me about you," he said, fidgeting with his shirt. "Thanks for helping me, by the way." "It was my pleasure," the man replied, standing up and facing the dreaded man. They stood at the same height, both towering Clementine, who stood beside Javi. "And who might this be?" Javi asked. "Oh, excuse me. This is Louis," she informed him. "My husband." Raising an eyebrow, Javi looked down at Clem and nodded slowly. He turned back to Louis, who smiled. "Nice to meet you," the dreaded man said, extending his hand to Javi. "Right back at you," he replied, firmly shaking his hand. "You guys want to come in? We got some food left over for you if you're hungry." AJ's stomach grumbled by way of reply, and Javi chuckled. He led them inside, signaling for the guards at the door to lower their weapons. Without a second thought, they followed his instruction and proceeded to lower the gate once more. Clementine took note of that as he walked with them through the main street. The houses to either side were simple, with vibrant colors that contrasted with the dead atmosphere on the outside of the wall. Some of the front lawns were decorated with small stands, little signs announcing the trade the owner was willing to make. Clementine and Louis marveled at the street lights, most of them connected by cables that ran along the walls of the building. "You know, I was shocked when Randall came in and said you were at the door," Javi commented as they walked past the run-down barber shop. "Though he was pulling my hair again." "Thanks again for letting us in," Louis put in, walking beside his wife. "This seems like a great place to live in." "My pleasure," Javi said, as they got to a building with a banner over the door. On it was the name Richmond with big red letters. Clementine here was a big help in starting all this. "She was?" Violet asked, casting a sideways glance at the other woman. "Yeah, she helped me and Gabe clear out the place of walkers when it was overrun. It was because of her that this place is what it is now, actually. I helped a little bit," Clem muttered dismissively, looking away. "All right, I'll give you guys a little tour, and then you can eat," Javi promised. As they walked, a soccer ball rolled its way toward Louis. The man caught it and looked up. Seeing two small children run toward it, smiling, Louis picked it up and handed it to one of the girls. She thanked him and ran off toward the small courtyard, her friend catching up to her. Clem watched the girls bound off, smiling as she thought their child could one day smiling at the thought of their child one day playing among these kids. A radio static was heard, and Javi groaned, grabbing it from his belt. Yeah? Javi, you still need that food delivered to the hall? A woman's voice said. Yep, send them over in about 30 minutes, he replied, his tone passive and kind. You hear an affirmative grunt from the other side, and then radio silence. Violet walked forward, raising an eyebrow at Javi. So, who's in charge here? She asked. Well, technically I am, Javi informed them. But it's a democracy. Everyone has a vote in the coming and goings of the community. That's good, Clementine complimented. Javi led them toward an ornate-looking door, the wood around the frame growing spots of mold. Clem took note of that as an older man opened it and walked inside. When they entered, Clem heard Louis whistling. They were in an enclosed space similar in size to the music room back at the school. Around them, blossoming boldly, were dozens of plants and vegetables. A man and a woman stood by a carrot patch, taking note of the height of their produce. Mind if I show my friends around? Javi asked them. Drawing their attention, they smiled at the man and nodded. Returning to their task, this is a greenhouse, he told the group, who were now looking around the place in awe. The room was covered from floor to ceiling in bright colors, accenting their drab clothing. Clementine noticed patches of potatoes on either side. In the middle of the room were mostly flowers and plants, their names and uses listed on small signs beside each of them. Two small cupboards stood to the side, their insides filled to the brim with gardening supplies. This is incredible, breathed Violet, caressing the beautiful daffodil growing on one of the flower beds. Javi nodded, looking around. It took some time, but we got it working eventually, he informed them, walking toward a back door. I didn't want to have to go back to Joan's ways. That's understandable, Clementine commented, following Javi out into the alley beyond the door. They walked through a busy street, people's heads turning in the direction of the new group. Most barely spared a glance for them, choosing instead to go back to their activities. As they passed an open space where a number of horses were being kept, a man approached Javi with a smile. His blond beard was gruff, reaching his chest. He wore a pair of burgundy glasses behind kind eyes, and had a few balding spots on his head. His clothing consisted of a white sleeveless shirt and a pair of blue torn jeans, much like those Louis wore every now and then. Ah, Javi, the man said, his voice mellow. I was hoping you'd come by. John, Javi greeted, clapping the man on the shoulder. What can I do for you? I've been working on those mods for the saddle you asked for. You know, he began, showcasing for them a leather holster with a larger strap attached to it. You have a moment to help me with it? Sure thing. Not as deaf nowadays, John joked, showing them a stump that replaced his left hand, making Clem frown. Walker bite? She asked, tilting her head. Sure was, John replied with a grin. Don't worry, I'm lucky to be alive. Good thing Javi here was there when he was. Owe my life to this man, he added, patting Javi on the back. They both went into the makeshift stable, leaving the group standing just outside. Oh, excuse me. Clementine inspected the street ahead. People milled about pleasantly, exchanging words with their neighbors. Scaffolding had been placed by an apartment compound right next to the stables. Two men were busy having a bunch of metal pipes up on the second story. Barely 2 minutes later, Javi returned and they continued their journey. The group passed a bigger gathering to their left, making Javi chuckle. He stopped, extended his arms to show them their next stop. Speaking of stop, this is where I will end part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of Blaze the Cat Reads Chapter 4 of The Walking Dead, Hope.